It looks like our participant count is beginning to stabilize. Welcome everyone to this afternoon's webinar, where we're going to talk about a request for proposals that has been recently issued from the Institute on the Environment. We're going to talk about that call for proposals today and answer some questions you might have. Welcome. I'm Jessica Hellman, the director of the Institute on the Environment, and with me for today's presentation is Kathy Jordan. She'll have a thing or two to say here in a moment, and Melissa Kenny, who also will walk us through several resources that are relevant to the RFP. We're recording this presentation, so we hope you'll have a look or invite others to have a look at this webinar when it's posted online, and please feel free to come back and consult this resource as appropriate when you prepare your proposals. Again, welcome. I'm Jessica Hellman. My responsibility in this webinar this morning is to welcome you and to share just a few introductory remarks about the Institute and about our motivation here for this request for proposals and the impact goals as a concept. So you find yourself here at the Institute on the Environment. What is the Institute on the Environment? It is a university-wide entity that is responsible for enabling and championing and making visible interdisciplinary scholarship and education related to environment and sustainability. In fact, we are a mission-oriented organization. We strive to use the tools of higher education to help bring about a future where people and planet prosper together. We're looking to support and enable a community of people who are striving to move the needle on sustainability. And we do that on behalf of the University of Minnesota and its partners, friends, partners, and the greater public. We also like to say that this work is pursued in Minnesota for the world, which means that we do things that are important to our citizens in our state and our economy and our local environment, but we're also looking outward around the globe, thinking about how we can participate in a global community, draw upon the resources and expertise we have here at the University of Minnesota, and export some of that knowledge and capacity around the world. So at the Institute on the Environment, over the last couple of years, actually under our current strategic plan, which started in 2019, we have been focused on something we call impact goals. Impact goals is a philosophy, it's an initiative, it's a strategy that infuses the entire Institute, its programming, its activities, and its people. It enables us to direct our work and our events and our curricula, lots of things that we do at the Institute, toward goals. Keyword being goals. We ask ourselves, what is needed? Who is needed? What research is needed? What capacity building is needed in order to move the needle on specific goals? And we call those impact goals. At any one time, the Institute is focused on a couple of goals. We have 3 at the moment. Our idea for impact goals is that over time, we will take on new and additional goals. So we have 3 now. Soon we'll actually be looking forward to imagining what new goals the Institute might like to shine its bright light on. Our 3 current impact goals are focused on creating a carbon neutral Minnesota, again, in Minnesota for the world, clean drinking water for all Minnesotans, and envisioning, establishing, and discovering what does a sustainable land use look like in Minnesota and for the world. In the current RFP, however, those 3 goals, quote, impact goals, are a major focus for the proposals. So we're inviting proposals that address those 3 current impact goals. But there's more than that. We also invite proposals that specifically address the intersection of sustainability and nutrition in food systems, especially ones that also proposals that address customers or the food policy environment. And lastly, we have a bit of an open category that says, or you could define another aspect of sustainability that you can articulate as a goal and express how the work in your proposal would move the needle toward that goal. So one bucket are 3 impact goals. Another bucket, the intersection of food and nutrition, food sustainability and nutrition. And a third bucket, an open-ended, self-defined sustainability goal, if you will. Why those 3 buckets? Because in fact, there are 3 streams of funding that underlie this particular RFP. One comes from the standard granting program of the Institute on the Environment. One comes from a philanthropic gift from the Feeding the Future Foundation. And one source of funds comes from a new innovation fund that was established under the Impact 2025 Intersections commitment. That's why we have these 3 areas corresponding to different pools of funding. As I lead to is I'm going to turn to Melissa Kenny here in just one moment, who's going to walk us through the request for proposals, links currently shown on this slide, through some frequently asked questions, how to submit a statement of intent, and so on. I want to highlight one more thing before I pass the microphone, and that is a key to this RFP, 2 actually keys to this RFP. One is to focus on impact. We are asking the question, what are barriers to knowledge or capacity building or education that we need to overcome, that higher education and teams of people can contribute to, that if we overcome that barrier, we will be closer to achieving our goal. And the second is an emphasis on collaboration and participation with partners outside the university. So hold on to those 2 ideas. How are your proposals moving us toward a specific goal and leading to impact? And how is it that you're bringing participants from outside the university to engage in work that we pursue collaboratively within the university? And with that, I would like to turn to Melissa Kenny, who will introduce herself and walk us through some of the parts of the RFP.
Thanks so much, Jessica. Hi, I'm Melissa Kenny. I'm the Director of Research and Knowledge Initiatives at the Institute on the Environment. And if you're like me and you are applying to these things, sometimes it's just helpful to have someone just walk you through what you can read, to just highlight a few pieces that are particularly important for you to keep your eye out for. So let me do that. What I'd like you to do, and I know this is getting shared in chat right now, the key links. I'm going to invite you all to join me in looking at the RFP. I'm also going to share my screen just so you can see where I am. And note at the very bottom of the RFP, there is page numbers after the first page. So on the first page of the RFP, 2 things Melissa? I want to. Oh, yes.
Could you maybe zoom in a little on that? It's quite small for the viewer. Thank you.
Okay. On the first page, so, okay, zooming out, here's the first page. Zooming in, what I'd like to do is point out, if you have questions, first, take a look at our FAQ. We're trying to keep up to date with any of the things that are coming through these listening sessions and Q&A sessions, but also questions that are sent to the email address that you see right here, IonE@umn.edu. So if you look at that FAQ and you're like, my question is still not answered and I forgot to ask it during this Q&A session, send it to us over email. We'll reply to you individually if it's more of a personal question, and we'll reply in the FAQ to any questions that we receive that we think the entire group would benefit from. Okay, moving to the second page, this is the introduction. And as Jessica mentioned in this introduction, a few things to, again, give you a little bit more detail and context for this particular call. First is our IonE strategic plan, which is linked in the second paragraph. And additionally, the Impact 25 or the intersection priority areas. Again, what we're really aiming to fund are projects that are done in collaboration. So they're interdisciplinary, not just a single discipline or school, but across university partners and with community members that clearly articulate how you're moving the needle towards a future where the people and planet prosper together, really describing that societal impact. If you're interested in projects we've previously funded, there's a link here where you can take a look at some of the projects that are currently underway. In terms of requests for the proposals, the kinds of proposals that we're most interested in taking a look at are ones that are deploying this impact goal philosophy and are addressing a couple of key priority areas. One is our current impact goal areas, becoming carbon neutral, defining a sustainable land use, and achieving clean drinking water. Second is practices and innovations at the intersection of healthy and sustainably produced food. And then third is things more broadly related to other sustainability objectives or outcomes, including campus sustainability and how we can become more sustainable in our own campus homes. And to do that, one of the things that you'll see in the proposal that we ask you to do is to be really clear about the barriers to achieving that larger societal goal and the things that you're tackling in order to overcome and make progress towards achieving that goal. We are deploying up to $700,000 that are the combination of IonE grant funds, Mentor section allocations, and philanthropic dollars from Seeding the Future Foundation. One thing that we use throughout the text of this is this term called community partner. And I wanted to point out this footnote on the bottom of page 3, because when we talk about community partner, we could be referring to a community organization, but we actually take a broader definition beyond just community organization to include nonprofits, local district or state governments, tribal governments, or other kinds of organizations that are really critical partners with us in this work in order to catalyze the application, evaluation, or scaling of sustainability actions. If you're really interested in pursuing an idea and might be struggling with like, who might I partner with within our broader community, please feel free to reach out to us or to our colleagues at the Regional Sustainable Development Partnerships, RSDP. Linda Kingery, you'll notice is on the call here today, and she's one of our collaborators that really helps to connect community partners and university partners together towards these shared goals. This call for proposals, we're funding proposals up to levels of $100,000. These are 2-year grants, and they're intended to catalyze impact within these topic areas. A few key things to keep in mind. First is, though it's optional, we are highly encouraging people to submit a statement of intent. This is literally a 5-minute form. It's intended to be super fast, but one thing that we're trying to line up, because we're deploying funds this fiscal year, is a really strong slate of reviewers who can help to appropriately assess the proposals that we receive, and your responses to that statement of intent will help us to be able to do that. Second is the proposal is due March 15th. The proposal is submitted via this submission form, and if you go to the FAQ, you can see screenshots of both the statement of intent form and this proposal submission form, that so you know what you're filling out before you go to submit that form. The form includes basic information about the team, a 100-word summary of the idea, and the ability to submit as a PDF the proposal packet. And that proposal packet includes a cover page, which is the title and the team the team leader and the team members. Part 2 is a proposal. This is a proposal that is no more than 5 pages, single spaced, and a reasonable font. I think we said 11 or 12 point font. And it includes a couple of elements, and you can organize these in a way that you think best tells a story. We're interested in the problem statement and objective. What's a barrier that you're hoping to overcome? Those barriers can be knowledge gaps, leadership or education gaps, policy strategies, market-based solutions, other barriers that are preventing progress. And we'll come back to the leadership and education after we go through the sort of administrative details. The project plan and approach. How are you going to achieve the project goal or outcome that you set forth? What are your methods? And if there's any questions about whether or not this is a new project or pivot of an existing project, clarifying that would be particularly helpful. And I point that out especially for folks who have previous or current IonE funding who are planning to submit for this particular call. Next is the outcomes and the intended outcomes, intended impact. What are you hoping to achieve? How is the needle going to be moved towards the goals that you're working towards? What are you trying to catalyze? And within the proposal, we're asking that you identify the roles of the team member. Some of that might also be defined in part 3, which includes a couple of supplemental materials, such as a project management description. These are team projects, so we're interested in how you work together and what resources you might be drawing on to achieve your goals. Citation, so you can provide references within your proposal text and share those. And the biographical sketches or resumes, about 2 pages for each team member. There's no prescribed format, but there's some guidance on some of the things that sections that we typically expect to see. Finally, the last portion is the budget. We're interested in your total budget and what you're requesting it for. Budgets follow this template. So if you click on this link, what you'll be taken to is a Google spreadsheet that you can copy and customize for your own project. And then you can print that with instructions here so that it can be added to the PDF. The budget justification, when you go to this, let me see if I can just pull it up for you right now. When you go to this budget template, what you'll notice is at the bottom, there are 2 tabs. One is the tab for the budget, and we provided just some examples to help you think through how to budget for year 1 and year 2. The second tab is the justification. So this gives a little bit of a description of why and what you're using that budget item for. So if it's salary expenses for someone, it partially describes their role, leadership of task 1 and 3 that's defined in the project. For example, for community partners, these are often subawards or subcontracts where what we do is summarize the essence of what would be included in that subaward or subcontract. If there is a cost share, meaning that part of one's salary is included or you're leveraging existing equipment or things of sort, just to help us with evaluation of the realistic nature of the scope of work, we ask that you identify some of those cost share items below. One thing to note is whether or not there is cost share included in the budget has absolutely no bearing on the ultimate decision that is made. It just helps us if the scope of work is larger than what we think could be accomplished with $100,000 to be able to know how you would actually achieve that level of work. If your proposal is selected to move forward, the second phase of this is doing pitches or a short presentation to a round of reviewers for about 10 minutes, followed by a 10 to 15 minute Q&A. we ask that anyone who is interested, who submits to this RFP, reserve a large block of time on May 18th. We will follow up with scheduling for all finalists. We can't guarantee a specific time until we set schedules. So that's why we ask that you reserve several hours of time on the 18th in case you are selected as a finalist. Before we move to the criteria for evaluation and review, I'd like to pause here and turn things over to Kathy Jordan to just have a brief conversation about some of the proposals that we're interested in and the interdisciplinary nature of what we're seeking.
Thanks, Melissa. I'm Kathy Jordan. I direct the leadership development and sustainability education activities at IonE. And I just want to tell you about some things that are either new or they're receiving some newer increased emphasis this year. So just to clarify, we are being explicit this year that we are welcoming of proposals that are primarily or include activities that are curricular, educational, training related, et cetera. And that would fall in two categories. At least that's what we're anticipating. One would be, it's essentially pedagogical research. It's educational research about the impact of an existing or something that you're going to develop, educational activity or curriculum. The other might be educational activities that are sort of a student experience or a community education activity that you could conceptualize like you might with NSF broader impacts. So it's something sort of on the side of a research project that's intended to deepen or broaden the impact of that research project. Just like with what you might call sort of regular research projects that you might think of as the traditional way that we have done RFPs around impact goals, these educational or pedagogical focused proposals need to align with the priorities that Jessica and Melissa laid out. They need to be community engaged. They need to have an interdisciplinary focus. Specifically for the broader impact idea, that community engagement and interdisciplinarity, et cetera, can be it can be attached to the more research side of the proposal that the educational piece is sort of attaching to as broader impacts. But particularly for educational or pedagogical research, that first area I talked about, treat that like any other research proposal. And make it align with the topical areas of interest, make it community engaged, make it interdisciplinary. The other thing I wanted to mention is just to stress that sometimes folks assume that the RFP is really specific to or somehow privileges environmental sciences or natural sciences, physical sciences. And we really want to stress that we are very much interested in proposals that include or are proposed primarily by disciplines across the board, humanities, social sciences, et cetera. This is meant to be interdisciplinary, but any discipline can lead that proposal. And the last thing I want to say is that particularly with regard to education related proposals and proposals that are led by humanities or social science disciplines, it would be extremely helpful to us for you to fill out that statement of intent, because that will really help us understand, do we need specific types of reviewers in order to be able to understand your proposal? I think that is all I need to tell you. So I'm going to pass it back. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Kathy. And we can get into additional questions if there's clarification needed on any of those points. The final piece that I wanted to point out in this RFP document is our criteria for evaluation and review. Our goal is to be fully transparent about what we are looking for. And when you look at these criteria, what you will notice is that they line up pretty well with what we have just talked about. We want projects that advance a sustainable future, given the topics that we have identified in this RFP. We want interdisciplinary projects that are community engaged. We're looking for things that are new endeavors or a significant pivot. We're looking that you should be really clear on the barrier or barriers that you're trying to address and overcome. You should be thoughtful and rigorous in your methods. You should clearly identify the outcome and the impact that you are hoping to achieve and work towards. And then in terms of the team composition, we want to ensure that the team's well-equipped, that has a clear plan, the budget and budget justification are reasonable, and that as we look forward, this funding has the opportunity to leverage and attract additional funding and support, that it can grow in ways beyond just what we are seeding here. If you're directly focused on innovative ways of engaging or addressing historic injustices, and including historically excluded people or marginalized communities or new stakeholders, projects that are addressing or reducing inequitable sustainable pathways, these are projects that would be particularly desirable within this particular call. And we're for projects in particular that are addressing sustainability and nutrition, think about also how they address adoption by consumers and the impact on food policy. We have a couple of reminders of the big dates and what our timeline is. One thing you should be aware of is that we're going to be making final award announcements by June 1st of this year, and projects will begin as of this summer, July 1st, 2022. And with that, these Z links were shared with you in the chat, frequently asked questions, and then statement of intent and the proposal submission form. So I'm going to stop sharing at this point, and I'd love to open it up to question and answers. All right, and I'm just giving me a second so I can navigate to the poll EV and see where we are with Q&A.
And the benefit of the poll EV is that people should use the poll EV rather than the chat window, correct? Is that the preferred platform?
Yes, we'd prefer that folks use poll EV rather than the chat window for two reasons. One is you can up and down vote questions depending on what is most interesting to you. And the second reason is we're able to more easily record these questions so that anything that's not in the FAQ, we can add into the FAQ after this webinar so everyone can benefit from the answer.
Thank you.
Okay. A couple of questions that have come through. So first question is 2-page bio sketches for each team member. Yes, we want the bio sketches, not just for the PIs, but for all the team members. And remember, your team includes not just people at the university, but also community members. The format can be what is most familiar and appropriate given one's expertise, and outside the university we know that's not an NSF style bio sketch. So anyone's resume in a format that is relevant. And if you have any questions or concerns about that, because you're working with community partners who do not typically use resumes as their predominant way of communicating their expertise, please reach out and contact us. We don't want that to be a barrier for engaging the right community partner in moving forward this work. Second question we got is what percent—
Can I just interrupt for 1 second and acknowledge that yes, people are this darn chat window doesn't let you copy paste. So yes, they will need to type polev.com from the slide here. And I believe that Courtney acknowledged that we will be sure to send out all the links subsequently. So many apologies about that.
Oh, thanks. I'm sorry that that's a difficulty with this. We had hoped that you would be able to click and be able to easily access it.
And can you repeat the bit in the chat window? Can you talk about the format of the sketch just one more time? You said whatever format.
Yes, whatever format is most appropriate given the expertise of the team member. One thing in terms of the kind of information that would be most helpful for people to evaluate team members, if you go to part 3, part 3 of the RFP, it's on pages 6 and 7. On the top of page 7, you'll see biographical sketches and resumes. We specifically say there's no prescribed format, but please include someone's name, position and title, education, professional appointments, and publication or significant work products or outcomes, very, very broadly defined for team members. For academics, there's a more prescribed set of like work products that we typically share. For our community members, these will differ depending on what is most relevant and important given their role and expertise.
Melissa, just to be clear, the academic kind of style that you were referring to was an NSF, National Science Foundation bio sketch. We're not saying that we require that. So even within academia, you could complete a bio sketch in a different kind of format. It's basically how do you best tell the story that will help us understand your capacity and the capacity of your team to carry out this work.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's right. Okay, I'm returning back to PoleEV to pull up a couple of other questions. So one question we received is the scale of the problem or project an important consideration? Jessica, can I turn this one to you?
Yeah, and we should reference the criteria. I do think we are interested in projects that have the possibility to scale or to think about what is the potential reach of the consequences that you were doing. That's not to suggest that where a project starts or even where it is implemented needs to be on a particularly large scale, but the issue or the way that it's being confronted could be broadly applicable. And Melissa, you should translate that please in the context of the language of the criteria that I do not have in front of me, but you might have in front of you.
Yeah, I mean, because of the topics that we are considering at this moment with the IonE Impact Goals, if you're addressing one of the IonE Impact Goals, we're particularly interested in deploying this in Minnesota for the world approach. So we are looking for projects that are based within Minnesota that have the ability to scale within the state and potentially beyond to the Midwest region, nationally and internationally. For sustainable food systems, that scale is more flexible. We want things that are relevant to Minnesota, but if what is most relevant to Minnesota is tackling an issue that is regional or national or international, you just want to be really explicit about what the connection back is to Minnesota. And for other sustainability topics that are related to intersection priorities, if it's campus sustainability, we want to see things on campus that have reach outs to the community where campuses are involved. Other sustainability issues, if you're tackling something broader than the state of Minnesota, we want to know why it's relevant to understand it at that scale, so that we can then think about how it links back to our state. We are a land grant university and institution, and so part of our goal is to really think about how we can support sustainability action within our state borders.
And I'll just add on top of you, Melissa, because I had a similar question come in recently. What about something that is going on in Minnesota that is applicable elsewhere, or that we could extract a project or an expertise in Minnesota that has national or international, and that also would fit the concept of sort of relevance to our state and extending at scale outside of the borders of the state.
Yeah, great questions. And I'm going to try and keep us moving because I want to see if we can get through all of our questions today. So the next question we got was, would two faculty with different expertise in the same University of Minnesota department and a private sector employee make an acceptable team? Short answer is, I think so. It depends. The different expertise, we would want to be really clear about what that is. And that sounds like a great question to send to our email address, IonE@umn.edu, so that if you want to propose that particular grouping, that you can get clarification before you start working on the proposal, that that team is one that would check the criteria box.
And if I may, Melissa, I might add on top of that, one way to think about the interdisciplinarity is we tend to see interdisciplinary as a tool, as a feature rather than per se the desired outcome. That if you think about moving the needle on sustainability or overcoming a barrier toward a specific sustainability goal, often that necessitates some interdisciplinarity. Hypothetically, that might be a technology and an understanding of the market for that technology, or a sociological appreciation of a community concern with a biophysical scientist. I don't know, something like this. So when you think about, is it interdisciplinary enough, you might ask the question about translation and impact. And that will say, do we have the people and the expertise at the table in order to overcome that barrier and to make progress toward the goal?
Thanks, Jessica. That broader framing and context is what we always want you to come back to, because that societal impact is key to proposals that are most likely to be successful for this funding. The next question we had was, what percentage of the funds will go to support University of Minnesota staff and faculty and versus community partner expertise? There is not a prescribed budget for particular how work would be divided or funding would be divided amongst team members. A few things to keep in mind. One of the reasons why we expanded the level of funding for this RFP is we believe it's really important for people who are part of the teams to be funded to do the work that is scoped collaboratively. And in a number of cases, that means that they need to be funded in order to do that work. And so we would expect to see in the budget either that a community partner has funding to be able to fully be a team member as part of this project as the work is scoped out in the project plan, or that we would see in the cost share that there was ways of covering the time that's required for the person to participate if it's not included in the budget. Again, cost share is not required. It is not a consideration in any decision that's made of whether or not to fund a team. It's simply used to be able to provide a bit of a reality check if someone's collaborating with a team member that, say, cannot accept funding to cover their time on a project, and they're covering it through their current professional work and obligations. We just want to see that so that we know that what is being proposed is feasible given how the budget is structured and how people are covering their work time.
And Melissa, may I add a thought on there that's a slightly different wrinkle, but inspires me to make an additional comment. And that is that these, why do we have this granting program? we're trying to drive outcomes, but ultimately we're seeking to create collaboration and to stimulate activity that comes from and enlivens the University of Minnesota. So these are proposals through and via the University of Minnesota. That's why they have University of Minnesota PIs. But they can absolutely and should extend to the other collaborators on the team. And I also wanted to say that we love supporting students, postdocs, other components of the university community on those budgets as well.
So one thing that might be linked to what you're sharing, Jessica, is someone stated, 3 times I hear you're interested in benefits brought to the University of Minnesota, whether as the subject of land grant reception or that the intent is to direct impact to the university is preferable. I'm sorry, I'm reading this, trying to read this word for word. Is it directionality from outside in, or is it outside directed out? I think it means inside directed outwardly. So what are we looking for in terms of impact and benefits?
So this is a terrific question. I'll make sure I answer this thoughtfully. And I know Melissa, you and Kathy, you also can add in this. The University of Minnesota is not intended to be the beneficiary. It is intended to be a key means of capacity and delivery, if you will. So what is the research question, the co-produced inquiry, the demonstration project, the pedagogical development that can be brought forward for the world in Minnesota, for the world, for our community partners, with private sector, any variety of external folks, through and with the university, not for the university, but that deploys and enables and leverages the university. And if we're successful, puts university participants in conversation with and in collaboration with partners outside the university, forging forging meaningful projects and relationships.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. And that leads maybe nicely into another question, which is, can you expand on what you mean by sustainability pathways?
Did I say sustainability pathways? Did you say sustainability pathways?
We might have used the term, but maybe reframing that is what do we mean when we're talking about sustainability impact?
Yes. So so we have our 3 impact goals. What carbon neutrality? If carbon neutrality was a goal, what is a barrier, a problem, either a research issue, a people capacity issue, a demonstration issue that stands in the way to achieving that goal of carbon neutrality? That is how we defined impact, and the ability to articulate why this project, this team of people, the capacity that they're bringing forward, what the work that they would pursue will get us closer. It will overcome some barrier that just stands in the way, and we will never get to that goal as long as this barrier is there. And this team is uniquely capable to figure out this barrier, to overcome this barrier, and explain to us why that is such an important barrier. I think that's what we mean by pathway. So I tend to think of it as if we're on a journey and we are discovering as we go along, what are pathways, or what does the journey to a sustainable future look like? We do not know. This is part of there are many things we do know. We know equity and justice that are important. We know carbon neutrality is important. But there is much discovery and learning to be doing along this journey towards sustainability. But what are the roadblocks that stand there that we need to overcome in order to get closer to those goals, be it they are 3 impacts, be it a food system that is also nutritious, that can feed people and is sustainable, and that people will engage in, or another sustainability goal that might fit under the intersections. I think that's kind of what we mean by sustainable pathways. What are the barriers standing in the way, and how will this project help us to overcome that barrier? And in the absence of overcoming that barrier, we will be stuck.
Yeah, which gets to another question, which is, can you speak to the importance of a research question or knowledge gap in proposal evaluation? With a focus on impact, more research isn't always what is needed to move the needle. Is this RFP focused on research for impact, or not necessarily research, as long as that work has impact?
All right, I need to read that. Can you speak to the importance of a research question or knowledge gap in proposal evaluation? Yes. So as Kathy Jordan spoke, and maybe we can turn back to Kathy to put a finer point on this. They won't, all the proposals do not have to have a research question or knowledge gap. They can also address some, say, curricular gap or pedagogical gap. They also could address, say, a demonstration gap. Maybe there's some aspect of research about the deployment of some knowledge. So it does not have to be, say, hypothesis driven. That said, a number of our proposals will address a research or a knowledge gap, I suspect, but they do not need to. So by impact, we would ask you, whatever you're describing, if it is a knowledge gap or a pedagogical approach, whatever it might be, we will ask you to articulate how filling that knowledge gap or deploying this educational capacity or pursuing this demonstration project, how filling that, say, knowledge gap is connected to having impact. What is the necessity of that, of filling that gap to get closer to impact? I think that's, this is what we mean by articulate what is the barrier that you are overcoming that gets us closer to achieving the goal. But it need not necessarily be research. Kathy, would you think, have something to offer more on that, or does that stand good with you?
I think that stands good with me. Thanks, Jessica.
So there's two questions that have been upvoted that are focused on budget. So April, I'm putting you on notice in case some of these are ones you'd like to particularly clarify. First is that there was a question about, it seems like partnership is a term that has been greatly stratified. I have witnessed PI and university staff compensated at very high rates for longer timeframes than partners compared to community experts in the past. And it seems like there is a desire to have a little bit of clarification on aspects of the budget related to distribution amongst university versus community members.
So on that, I think we would acknowledge that point as an important observation, and that it has certainly been true. And I would invite teams to confront those issues and to think about who is a member of your team, who is contributing this team, and what is the level of support that they need in order to conduct the project that you're proposing. And I would second what Melissa said previously about our review of the budget. Will focus on the capacity of the team to conduct the work that it has been pursuing. So if it describes work that some person outside the university is going to pursue without a capacity for how that is supported financially or otherwise, that will be a problem. So the budget either should reflect that activity at a level that it does enable the work to get done, or some other form of support needs to be articulated. I think that's one of the key ways that we will be looking to make sure that the work that is proposed is adequately financially supported, which is only a tiny portion of this larger question about about how funding has traditionally flowed from and through the university. April, who is our finance and grants person, among other talents, would you add to that?
I would concur what you said, Jessica, and I think when it comes down to very specific, case-specific budget questions, you can reach out to me directly. And especially as we're just looking at the statement of intent period and proposal period, just making sure you do have your community partners and experts budgeted in there. And when it comes down to the final period in this timeline, we can work out those budget scenarios more specifically to your case. But otherwise, yep, Melissa put my email in there. I manage the IonE at umn.edu, so you could reach out to me directly, and I'll be able to respond to those. And if I think that they would be useful for the entire audience, we'll make sure those also get in the FAQs document.
Great. A question for you, April, is the RFP mentions that funding can't be used for capital equipment. Does this mean no sensors or instrumentation can be purchased as part of these grants? Or is there some kind of financial threshold that makes something capital equipment?
Typically, it's $5,000 or above. A lot of times you'll have, for instance, pieces of equipment that are under $5,000, but that contribute to capital equipment. For those, again, I would specifically on a case-by-case basis reach out to me at IonE. We meant that to be in general capital equipment of $5,000 or above, or pieces of equipment that become part of capital equipment.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. So looking at the time, we have 6 minutes and we still have a lot of questions. So we're going to just try and rapid fire through the remaining questions. So one question is, can you partner with another university even if they are overseas?
Who's taking that?
Yeah, Melissa, go ahead. I mean, you're going to say.
I was going to say, yes, we want to see people partner with universities like within our University of Minnesota system in particular. If you have specific questions about partnering outside of the University of Minnesota system, I think we should answer those on a case-by-case basis. So email ione@umn.edu. For a demonstration project, what are the research expectations? How much rigor?
I would like to, well, that's a question also that maybe could directed that maybe give us a little bit more specific information. What is the nature of how you're asking that question so that we can give you more guidance? But I would say the research expectation is, how do you define the barrier toward impact and what are you doing to address it? And is it what is the scale and import of that work? So that might, I mean, it's going to be rigorous, presumably, because this is a non-trivial barrier that stands in the way. But there are a variety of ways to define rigor.
Yes, and we funded work at highly localized scales, as well as scales at the state and region level. And so, as Jessica mentioned, being really clear about the barriers and how you're moving the needle is going to be really critical. Can you expand on the second impact goal of defining sustainable land use?
Our original impact goal was framed as the challenges of taking a standing landscape and identifying all of the things that would need to take place on that landscape, and sort of thinking about achieving sustainability at a landscape scale. If you think about this region of the world, for example, how much of the landscape is dedicated to agriculture, in what form, relative to forestry, relative to, say, other forms of native habitat conservation. That is a very quick summary of how we defined what is a sustainable land use in our impact goal. But that I suspect there could be a more specific question under that one too. So I would invite, if there are particular, can you give us advice on framing our issue or of our question? We can offer that as well.
A quick question about how do we partner with the University of Minnesota team lead if you don't have someone identified at the university and you're joining us here today as a community partner, please email us at IonE@umn.edu. We love to do matchmaking and help to connect you with colleagues at the university who would be interested in exploring partnership with you.
At least to do our very best to do so. And sometimes, it's not a 100% guarantee, but we've had many successes in that partnering.
Yeah, we love to connect folks when we can. Can you speak to the importance of a research question or knowledge gap in proposal evaluation with a focus on impact? Sorry, we already addressed that question. Yeah. One of the remaining questions is projects will be, it was highlighting this criteria we have, projects will be particularly competitive if they pursue innovative ways of engaging historically excluded people or marginalized communities and/or new stakeholders, or if they're explicitly using project approaches intended to address or reduce inequitable sustainable pathways. I'm not sure what the specific question is, but Jessica, maybe you can speak to our commitment as an institute towards becoming an anti-racist organization, what that means in terms of our strategic plan.
When we talk about striving toward a future where people and planet prosper together, that this is all people, that it particularly must recognize that there are communities and groups of people who have been excluded from the sustainability conversation or are subject to particular vulnerabilities in the absence of achieving that sustainability. And we want to specifically seek opportunities to overcome those that differential vulnerability or those inequalities. Furthermore, we are also interested in where issues of sustainability and the environment intersect with other social and perhaps economic issues as well. I think there's much richness and need to think about those interface issues, which may address disadvantaged communities, racial inequality, and other such issues. And we most certainly have our eye on those things.
So thank you all so very much for joining us here at this webinar to learn more about the RFP, to ask really thoughtful and insightful questions, and think of us as a partner. Our goal is for you to make our decision making really hard. We want lots of great proposals. We want to support you in writing and developing those proposals, whether it's helping find other collaborators or really thinking through the framing and development of your ideas. So if you have further questions or you want to ask a proposal specific question or get some guidance, please email us at IonE@umn.edu. We look forward to getting your statements of intent next week and your proposals next month, and are super excited to welcome our next cohort of impact teams later this summer.
Thank you everyone for spending time with us today and for your interest in our program. We appreciate it. Take care.